Good evening for those who are on so far. How's it going?
Good evening.
We will just wait for our friends and hopefully start sharp, as sharp at 5 as we can. We'll see. Keep posted on when we meet quorum to get started. Good evening, everyone. Our numbers are going up pretty quickly. It's 5 o'clock. I'm going to check and see if we are at quorum or not, and we are going to try to get everything started as quickly as possible because we want to be mindful of the time and all that we have to cover tonight. So give me just a moment. We're getting close.
Just making sure I'm not missing anybody. Hold on.
They do not, Haley.
Thanks. That's what I thought.
Hi, Representative Smith. Do I need to break out my ugly Hanukkah sweater?
I figured this might be our only opportunity, so please do. Absolutely.
Wow, I just noticed that. Thank you for pointing that out.
You should also know
Awesome.
that there's a tie and pants that match this jacket.
And happy Hanukkah. I think you definitely should change your background. We want to make sure we're acknowledging the holidays that are occurring and being fully inclusive. Okay, I'm just waiting for the word that we have reached quorum, and we will launch at that time.
Izzy, we are at quorum.
We are at quorum. Great. Okay. 502, not bad. Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Reading Consortium for Educational Equity. It is our final full body meeting of 2020, which is quite a year. And just very happy that we made it, and looking forward to what will be a substantial meeting this evening. Before I overview tonight's agenda so everyone knows what to expect, I just wanted to start out just by acknowledging the immense amount of hard work that has been going on for the whole past year and some change that we have been in existence doing this work. But in particular, the last couple of months since we brought forward the draft recommendations in October, just tons of work being done by consortium members, by non-consortium members on committees, certainly by our work group co-chairs, and probably more than anyone, the staff with IPA and DSU. So I just wanted to make sure to acknowledge all of that hard work and thank you all. And I think we're gonna have a really interesting evening reviewing the results of that work. So I know I'm very grateful, and I'm also very grateful to my co-chair, Matt Den, who I think is also very grateful to all of your work. So thank you for that. And it's exciting to reach this point of having what we're considering our interim recommendations. They're very substantial, but they represent the action that we've been talking about for this past year plus. And it's my hope that we'll be able to really dig into how they've been refined in the last 2 months and be able to move these forward with a unified front after some discussion and vote on motions about those. So I don't want to spend too much time just talking at you. So we will go ahead in just a minute into report outs from each of our 3 existing work groups after we do our roll call and everything, and Haley overviews everything. Each work group will have 10 minutes to present where they are with the final set of recommendations that they're making. And then we'll spend some time for consortium members only to respond, ask for clarity, and so on and so forth for about 10 minutes after each report out occurs. We are bumping up public comment to follow the 3 sets of report outs so that the public and other stakeholders who are non-consortium members have an opportunity to weigh in on what you hear before we move into our votes on motions for the recommendations. And then we'll go ahead and head into voting one by one on each set of recommendations with the co-chairs making motions on those. And then we'll talk at the end, after everything is successfully wrapped up, about what else we expect for our path forward. So that's what you can expect tonight. We are at 5:06, so I think we're kind of on time. And I'm going to yield just for a moment to Haley to make sure we've got our rules and roll call under control.
Yep. Roll call looks good. We definitely have quorum. I think we're good to go.
Okay, perfect. All right. Yep, I see the names rolling in. All right, good to see everyone, although I can't technically see all of you with screen share, but I'm scrolling through and happy to see who I can see. So I think we're going to start with funding and governance. So at this time, I'm going to invite Representative Nandu Chukwucha and Eugene Young to come before us and present your recommendations for the funding and governance work group.
Good evening. Thank you, Senator Lockman. On behalf of the Funding and Governance Work Group, pleased to present our recommendations this evening, our summation of the work we've been undertaking. That's a quick summary of the work that we've done. As many of you remember, once COVID came and just changed many things very quickly, our focus area shifted from just due to the work with our partner districts and their need to adjust and meet the immediate needs of our students and families during the transition of school closure and continuing on to the remote learning period. So we adjusted our work to begin to look at other areas of equity in terms of the funding group. And we transitioned to meeting. We met early on with our then House Chair of Education Committee, Representative Jakes, and about equity issues. And one thing came to us was about the equity in school funding, of course, on the local end. And we decided to look at House Bill 129 and its predecessor 213, and really seeing about ways in which we can view this issue. Again, and to us, it's a statewide issue, although Reading itself is primarily focused on students in Wilmington and Northern Newcastle County. We feel that inequity anywhere is inequity everywhere. And this is truly an equity issue, being a statewide revenue issue for all of our districts throughout the state. And as we thought about Reading itself, and regardless of our recommendations, when it's time to present our full recommendations and actually have legislation and bills and efforts and community plans to support our work, is going to entail a statewide support for our initiatives. So we view that this work in trying to understand statewide equity and just its touch on our work. So we've met with a group of stakeholders from superintendents, work very closely with our district CFOs, met with parents, educators, and other legislators about this legislation. And it's our goal that although knowing that the education settlement has drastically changed the funding environment within our state, we still believe that referendum reform is an issue of equity and truly at the local level. And our intent is to revise House Bill 129, and to overall to stop the need for regular referendums. Just as far as for schools, if they want to go out, they will still, if they want to just for their regular needs, they won't have to. But if they wanted to go out for major capital, then they would still have a referendum. So it's not taking it all away, but truly just addressing that yearly service and the amount of time that our districts spend, the resources, the energy and the effort that goes into a referendum, really feeling that time could be better spent in programs and services geared toward our children. So really just looking at the overall referendum reform and to finding a way to help our schools deal with that annual cost of inflation and the scheduled step increases. And again, it ensures that we have funding and fairness and equity all throughout our districts, from one end of our state in Del Mar all the way to Claymont. So under our bill, the school boards will have the opportunity to raise their taxes basically in three ways: A, B, or C. They could match the CPI index for cost of inflation, or they could raise it at a 2% rate, or the C option could be 1% or lower, but not higher than 2%. Again, as I mentioned, if a school board wanted to have a major capital for such as building a new school, they will still have to go to referendum reform. So it's not taking referendum away from that vote away. It's really just addressing that funding need. And again, the schools, it adds in there where there will be a one-time rate. So depending on where our districts are in their referendum cycle, a 2% increase might not be enough. So it allows for that one-time increase to make our districts whole so that they're not always behind. And the bill also takes into account the property reassessment work that is underway currently in our counties throughout the state. And our efforts are to add a provision, and we're meeting with many groups, getting feedback on the legislation. Our intent is to have a very well-supported piece of legislation that addresses the statewide equity issue, and to continue to address the equity issue statewide, and to make this bill a very strong one by adding in provisions that this bill taking reassessment in. If reassessment occurs, if and when it occurs, that this bill will be reassessed at that time. So it will be a part of and also including a component for districts that requires reporting far as the 2%. So some of the feedback that we've received, this feedback is will be going into the next iteration of this bill. And open it up for discussions or questions.
Do any consortium members have any questions or clarity you'd like on funding and governance work group recommendations at this time? I saw.
Senator Lockman.
Yes.
Said one question. Can we? Is there any way we can just discuss briefly what community groups have you've kind of discussed this with, and just kind of some of their feedback specifically?
Yeah, a few of the superintendents. We've met with superintendents, school leaders, and parent group. And a lot of the feedback is, as well as the CFOs that I mentioned, and a lot of the feedback is really some of the challenges that occurred within the previous attempts to have referendum reform bills presented, engagement into the community. That's why a strong part of our path forward is creating engagement strategies to truly take this issue of in understanding this issue into the community, so that all of our districts throughout our state understand what's really at stake when you went for a referendum. What reform, what does it really mean? We've heard a lot of questions regarding, I guess, the overall funding arena within our state, and how where it is, and how does this play a part in that? And again, we're trying to address that, especially the reassessment into the legislation, that if and when that occurs, that this bill will recognize that. Other feedback were just in terms of trying to get a understanding from understanding that how the rate itself, how is that coming about, and how do you make sure that 2% is enough, and that one-time increase. Those were a lot of the direct feedback we've heard from these groups. And again, a lot of it is just that understanding is still that voice of the community, thinking that if referendum goes away, then the constituents are losing their voice to vote on something. And we're trying to show that's still there, that you're not losing that.
And can I also add to Representative Chicoche, it's not as if everything is finalized as of right now. We're still having constant conversations. We're still meeting with people. So it's even at this moment, we're still even bringing on more feedback. So even if you want to email Haley or let us know, like, if you want to talk about things even moving forward, like, we're having these conversations right now. So just something to think about as well.
Great, thank you. I would just say a potential companion bill that I know is out there would be to reform the length of term for school board members.
Yes.
And that might be something you know, as to sell to the community on, you know, from an accountability measure perspective, because I remember that was one of the arguments in that regard on the education committee, if you remember. Also, just for the record, I think it's appreciate all of your work for true reform as well, and I think you'd agree. I think we need to also work through the funding formula for a true overhaul overall. And I just want to say that for the record and appreciate everything your committee did. So thank you very much, Representative.
Thank you, sir. And we also met with our Representative Bombach. That was one of the things that he mentioned, of course, that the term limit for the school. So it is a part of our consideration. Thank you.
Further questions or comments on the
I see-
recommendations?
Oh, sorry. I see Superintendent Holler has raised his hand.
Okay.
Thank you. Just want to clarify, the draft language says districts may, and that leaves the door open for individual districts if their stakeholders decide that they would rather go to referendum and seek the majority vote of the constituents they serve. They can still do that. And I think it's just important to point that out. It's not a total switch, but it allows the option for a district to pursue that. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
No, it's an excellent point of clarity. And Ms. Ingram, would you like to speak that verbally for the record as well, or?
No, thank you. I'm not feeling so hot.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Don't worry. It's okay. Thanks.
Well, I'll just repeat it if you don't mind. Just for the record in the chat, that we have a note that DSEA does support this ongoing work on referendum reform. Okay, we have a couple more minutes allotted if folks have any additional questions, observations, or concerns.
And again, please feel
Members
free.
only or public
Members
as well?
Yes.
And for our members, please, again, feel free. I think Haley just put her email in. If you have any thoughts or if you'd like to reach out to us, 'cause I know some people want to reach out for like one-on-ones or real, closer conversations, close conversations. Like, we don't have a problem with talking about it as well. So please feel free to shoot us an email, let us know.
Excellent. Excellent. And of course, we will have our public comment period for non-consortium members to speak up on this and other recommendations coming forward. And we do also use the chat freely as well. That's not for consortium members only. So I saw a note earlier thanking us for the work that had gone into that. So thank you so much for that. I think it was Lisa. Thank you. So if there's nothing further on this front, I think we will move on from the interim recommendations of the Funding and Governance Work Group. Oh, I see a phone number popping up. Unless I hear a voice, we're gonna move on. Yes, Senator Sturgeon will have the open comment and then also chat for now. The open comment comes after all of the work group presentations. Okay, so moving to our second presentation, a little bit ahead of schedule. Good. We will hear from our educator work group. So co-chairs Noel Picara and Mike Smith, Representative Smith. The floor is yours.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Senator Lockman. Our work group worked for quite a long time and got a lot done over the past more than a year now. Really came up with some recommendations that have some teeth to them and were low-hanging fruit for us to go after that were very actionable. And we originally came up with 4, narrowed that down to 2. So since my co-chair is an educator, I'm going to turn it over to her to educate you all on what they are, and then happy to field questions after that. Well,
thank you. I really appreciate all the festivity you're bringing to your Zoom today, Representative Smith. So We were tasked at the beginning. One major important point was the recruitment and retention of high quality educators. And we could see that that was a really big factor in student success. So one thing that has been updated since the last time that we met, as we went through the recommendations, we realized there was an inconsistent use of diverse educators, teachers of color that had come from some of the literature, the supporting research. And we thought it was really important to come up with a specific term that was clear as far as who we were looking for in high quality educators. And so this was the definition that we landed on, which was critical shortage area educator by race and ethnicity. And this is in keeping with some of the latest languaging around critical shortage area and making sure that that's also represented by race. We included in here attention to racial, ethnic, linguistic, and socioeconomic representation, and also an intentional focus on Black, Brown, and Hispanic, Latino populations, as well as males within those populations, because we know that those are critical shortage areas. We want to make sure that that becomes the focus. So the work group has approved these recommendations. Haley, if you want to go on, thank you. So the first one was the Grow Our Own initiative, which was aimed at recruiting and retaining those critical shortage area educators. So thinking about what the barriers might be for a lot of young Black and Brown male students, for example, in becoming educators. We did a lot of stakeholder engagement to try to learn about what the different ways were that people were becoming educators. And we also looked at these programs in a lot of other states that had been successful. So basically, we are looking at recruiting education professionals from the community, parents, other people who are invested in the community, maybe mentors, tutors, young people in teacher academies, and making sure that they have what they need to become teachers and that they have the mentorship needed, they have a path to becoming educators. So part of that is establishing partnerships amongst some of the groups in Delaware that are already working on that. And then our second recommendation that we focused on, if you want to move ahead, Haley, thank you. Oh, okay, sorry. So some other points in that, yes, there are already some existing teacher academies. So we want to make sure that we also assist them and figure out what's been successful and what hasn't, and invest in what's been successful. And then also the scholarship and tuition forgiveness programs expanded to help teachers who do become educators in high needs schools to be able to see that as a career path forward that's sustainable if they have to incur some debt in becoming teachers. Okay, so obviously this is kind of a long implementation plan. And as Eugene was saying about their group, there's obviously going to be an ongoing process with the implementation over several years. So again, if you have feedback and you still want to contribute to that discussion, that's a dynamic ongoing discussion that you can talk to Haley about. We've had several really great comments just this week, and we intentionally wrote the recommendations in a way that, that we could implement them using your feedback going forward in a way that's actually successful. And then here's our monitoring plan as far as how we will see if this program is effective. And again, we want to continue to work with other groups in the state that are doing similar initiatives, continue to work together. Here's our proposed budget. Again, this is first draft budget, but this was made based on similar successful programs in other states, and also talking to some of the partners about what the costs were for people to become teachers in Delaware and for the existing teacher academies. Okay, so here is our second recommendation, which is the whole school professional learning package. This one's going to be modeled on some existing packages that have been successful in Laurel and Seaford, Delaware, but they would be tailored to the high need schools in Wilmington. And it focuses on some of the data that we had about why high quality teachers were leaving schools, why schools had the most trouble, which often had to do with the administration and the climate. So we want to be able to support the entire school in a way that's focused on what that school specifically needs. So if you want to move forward, Haley. Thank you. All right, so here's our implementation plan. This one, because we had an existing model from Laurel and Seaford, was a little more tried and true in Delaware and would just be applied here to this area in Wilmington and Newcastle County. But again, we wanted to also create a model that could be replicated throughout the state as well, so that it is not only affecting Wilmington in the long run. Okay, so here's some of our indicators, how we're going to be monitoring to see if this is successful. And again, it's student focused and also focused on educators, self-reporting and retention of educators in those schools. And this proposed budget, again, is based on the schools that were successful already in Delaware and working in a similar program. So we have some time now for discussion and questions.
What do you guys have for us?
Hi, Noelle, it's Tika. I have a question. In terms of schools receiving the technical assistance and being able to tailor it to their needs, is that self-selected or is that based on their performance indicators?
So we have, schools have to meet some criteria to be a high needs school in the area that the consortium is serving. And then schools will be able to apply to be considered for those packages.
Okay, thank you.
Good question and good recommendations. Any other questions or requests for clarity, comments or concerns? This is our most veteran work group. You guys have been at it in your current format the longest. So, and it certainly shows with your monitoring and implementation plans. Any other questions? You can either do show of hands, comment in the chat, or just speak up.
Hello, this is Stephanie Ingram.
Hey,
Can you hear
Steph.
me?
Yep.
Hi, and I know I was part of the work group, but I've been talking to some folks outside of our work, and I just wanted to make a suggestion that we consider thinking about going outside of our borders and considering folks who will be best to kind of help some of these locals and school districts continue in their journey to think about the problems that they might have in their practice, reaching out to universities outside of Delaware who might have the skill set that we're looking for because they've been doing studies in their own communities that mirror our communities as well.
Okay, duly noted. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think the one important thing to also say is that, our recommendations are completely driven by partnership. Yes, there's dollars attributed to that, like everything else, but it's really driven by partnership. So many of you on this call, I know Noelle, Senator Lockman and Matt and I will want to reach out to you at some point on how we can do that, because as you could tell by some of those things, Noelle and I actually have to be intimately involved in all of this. So we're looking forward to continuing our work together too. So
That's great. And I'll just elevate the question about the numbers. What was the dollar figure and impact numbers in terms of how many educators might be engaged? Did you?
for which one? But we can, if we want to go back, we can show both.
Yeah, and I'm curious about that question. Did you mean for which recommendation or for both recommendations combined?
Probably for each. I mean, I guess the safe thing would be maybe just to touch upon it for each recommendation.
Yeah, so the total number for the second recommendation, we're projecting, again, right, these are projections because we don't have all of this stuff lined up. We have to propose it and ask for funding ourselves, right? But that would be 1.195 million. And then the grow your own was, where's the total? And then so the grow your own is a little, obviously a lot less. But we don't have the number of teachers affected. We try to pin it down by number of schools. And so I think a lot of that cost will be based off the school, and they might be able to roll it out. We also talked about attributing that to not all 4 subject areas to start. Maybe one school gets this like ELA, the other might get science, whatever it may be. So that way, the one piece of feedback we heard from teachers and alike and others was, let's not give us too much too fast so that we have buy-in and we're able to actually do this successfully, model it, and then grow it and build it from there across schools and districts.
And just another point about the teachers impacted, the educators impacted. For the professional learning package, there's 5 schools in that budget. So that total number covers 5 schools. So it would be all of the administrators, educators, support staff in those schools. And then for the grow our own, it's not pinned down to a number of educators. It's outlined more as this has how much it would be per educator. And then it depends on how many candidates there are. We'd want to fund as many candidates who were appropriate candidates as possible.
And Maria has her hand raised, Maria Matos.
I didn't hear the names of the schools that you said were successful in Seaford that we're basing this after. The school success.
Yeah, so you mentioned Laurel and Seaford. Are there specific schools where the pilot is taking place that we could cite or
There are, if you don't mind, we'll follow up with you after that. I didn't have that readily available, and that was one of the details we talked about, quite honestly, I think, and started talking about pre-COVID. So I need to get back on that one specifically, unless someone else has it and can throw it into the chat. Otherwise,
and one more question. What made them successful? What made them successful? How was that measured?
Are you more specifically in terms of the rubric or?
No. When we say we're going to resemble the schools, we're being asked to vote for this. So I want to understand how we measured. We picked this pilot because these 2 schools in Seaford were successful. So how was success measured and what did it look like? You know, did all the kids graduate? Did all the kids are reading at level? What was success? What made it success?
Sure. So some of the ones that come to the top of mind that we discussed were, one was test scores, the other was school climate. One of the things we kept hearing over and over again through the data and through stories was just the school leadership piece. So how is school leadership more bought in with the teachers and the staff, and how are they bought in with them? And so I think the school climate model, that was how they measured success in most categories. Noelle, am I missing any?
Well, I just wanted to weigh in that all of those indicators that Maria stated were included. So if you look at that monitoring plan, so the success metrics, I'm wondering, Senator Lockman, if that's the same question.
Yeah, I think it is.
In the monitoring plan, so what we have in that monitoring, as far as it was student attendance, surveys on climate, student performance and test scores and grades, and then also teacher retention as far as teacher reporting about their happiness there at the school. So all of those indicators were the same things that were measured in those particular schools. If you want to see the numbers as far as what the data was, we would have to send that to you, but it was shared early on. I know we're talking about a year ago at this point, but very early on, this is something we were looking at, I think in last November, and we shared it with the consortium at that time. But we would.
So that was the schools in Laurel and the schools in, I'll look it up, the schools in Laurel and the schools where?
And Fran, who's on, was intimately involved actually in that. So if you would like to discuss that, that would be good as well. But I know the results were mainly around academic growth and then getting the whole district involvement. But Fran, do you have anything to add to that?
Oh, so it was academic growth.
Correct.
And do we know how much growth the students had, and was it a diverse population of students? Were they English language learners? Were they African Americans? Were they did they all qualify for affordable lunch, school lunch?
I think these are important questions, and what's really important about this recommendation is that it's not a cookie cutter model. It's not that we're going to do the same exact thing in a school in Wilmington as what we did in a school in Laurel. So whoever was in that particular school, the program was modeled for those students in that school, and the package that's applied to a school in Wilmington will be modeled for those students in that school. So within the recommendation, it allows for the flexibility to model the professional learning package for the students in that school. Does that make sense?
And it was a diverse population, and it would also be defined as a high poverty in those schools as well.
And so, yeah, again, I see the questions in the chat about, was the population similar to the population of the schools in Wilmington? So it's not the intention of the recommendation that we're going to do the exact same thing as we did in that school. The intention is that we're going to put the money behind funding a school in Wilmington to look closely at their population and address their needs using the same kind of monitoring around student attendance, academic growth, administrative support, climate support, with the methods that support urban students, diverse educators, diverse student populations, depending on that specific school. That's the power of this recommendation, is that it's flexible and adaptable to a particular school. Because
so I just have one more question. Would the schools be able to have the autonomy to make the decisions based on the needs of their students?
That's the full intention of this recommendation, yes.
Yeah, and that's why we went with this, because it's not a recommendation that you would apply as a blanket to lots of schools. It's a very concentrated, specific, we put the money and resources into that school, and that school gets to co-plan with the professional learning package to do what they need in their school.
Even if the curriculum is different from what the district currently provides?
It's all supposed, the intent of the recommendation is, I guess the quick answer to that is yes. It's all supposed to be needs-based, based off of the populations that those schools are dealing with, and to Representative Williams' question, so that they see educators that look and speak like them, so that they can see themselves in the profession.
Yeah, and the recommendation does not include anything about changing curriculum.
It'd be a value add. It's not a change, I guess, would be the best way to say that. It would be in addition to, not deletion of.
And to Representative Williams' comment, yes, this proposal will also have the impact on educator diversity, although the Grow Our Own recommendation is more concentrated on educator diversity, with the educators looking like their students. That's specifically the wording in the Grow Our Own recommendation. The professional learning package also has the ability to address that.
And to Nia Brown's point, we didn't just look in Laurel and Seaford. We looked in North Carolina and other states as well on how these grow your own initiatives work and teacher academies. So it's not something that we just looked in Delaware. We did spread that out and see what their data looked at before, proposing this recommendation.
Thank you. Maria, did you feel like your questions were addressed?
I'm just not really sure if the district, we're going to select 5 schools, 5 pilot schools. Are they going to be in separate districts? Are the districts still going to control the schools? Are the schools going to have their own autonomy so that they can change the learning pattern or how it's taught? I mean, how is that going to happen?
I think, sorry.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I mean, all I would say to some extent to that from my own perspective is it's definitely, this model is not attached to any particular governance change in terms of decision-making structure. But I'd be happy to let you finish your observation or comment and let the co-chairs respond in that sense. But I just want to make sure that it doesn't change, technically speaking, any autonomy or just any governance structure in that sense.
I don't have any more questions for now. Thank you.
Great questions.
Well, and I do just want to say in February, these were the same recommendations that were approved by the consortium at that time. And at that time, we did share much more detailed information about those particular schools, which we all reviewed together, and they were approved by the consortium. So even though I don't have that on hand in this moment, we did do that. I know it was a long time ago, but there were a lot of questions about that at that time that were already addressed.
Well, that was in February, and it's been a year since we've been living under COVID. So excuse me if I didn't remember. I'm sorry.
Totally understandable. I appreciate your comments.
And I'm sure that we can pull back that information on the schools that were chosen and recommended, and make sure that everybody has an opportunity to review that before implementation moves forward. Any other questions? We have just about a minute more on this section. If anyone else has any questions or comments, and we are certainly noting commentary in the chat as well. And after our next presentation, we'll welcome public comments on any of these topics. So if there's nothing left, I don't see any hands, I don't think, or any other consortium members with comments. We're going to move to our third and final work group presentation.
Good evening.
Good evening. Sorry, Ray Jones Avery and Jeffrey Menzer will be presenting this, and the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Lockman, and good evening again, everyone. In keeping with the Reading Consortium charge to recommend policies and practices to achieve educational equity for all pre-K to grade 12 students in the city of Wilmington and northern Newcastle County, the Social Determinants Work Group was created earlier this year to assist the consortium in carrying out some of its responsibilities. We have been focused on efforts that take place outside of the traditional K-12 classroom in the years well before children enter the K-12 system, as well as throughout their K-12 experience, both during in-school and out-of-school time. Our work has only started. We've not the very newest, but we have been meeting for about 5 or 6 months. I'd like to thank, and you see before you, the members of the Social Determinants Work Group. We have a very impressive group of thought partners. And I would like to extend special acknowledgement to Dr. Roger Harrison, Dr. Yasser Payne, Tamara Smith, and Dawn Alexander for your leadership in the core areas that we'll outline in our recommendations tonight. So we do plan to make a number of recommendations in the coming year, but we really believe that it is just absolutely essential to make recommendations for resources in the proposed budget that will begin July 1, 2021. You know, as you all know, the educational journey is too urgent to wait until 2022. And a life can be a year in the life of a child can be very life altering, and certainly 2020 and the experience of both loss and opportunities cannot be overstated. So just so we have level set expectations, we are not presenting an implementation plan, and we also are sharing working definitions that are commonly accepted in the field for social determinants and institutional racism. And some of the lived conditions associated with impacting social determinants are overcrowded, substandard housing, environmental conditions, employment, lack of credit, and criminal justice impacts. So you can go on. So our interim recommendations are focused in two primary areas, with three primary areas: racial disparities research, school and community partnerships for wraparound services, and holistic child development. We focused on birth to age 5 thus far. So we're recommending that the state make thoughtful transformations to address race-related school inequality by investing in race-related research. And we do have certainly a system of data, but are we maximizing on the use of that data, and do we have data gaps? So we are recommending that data be gathered and presented in ways that are transparent and user-friendly, and that the sources of the data be both existing data as well as the collection of primary data. The methodologies certainly are varied, but the point is to capture student voice, parent voice, and the voice of community members as well as educators in ways that we currently are not doing as best as we can. You can go to the next one.
Thank you, Ray. So as Ray stated, we're approaching this from a multi-pronged perspective, and one of our other areas of focus is going to be assistance for students facing barriers of race and poverty. And the first sub-targeted area we're looking at is focused services for children from birth to age 5. And many of the barriers caused by poverty and systemic racism impact children well before they enter kindergarten. And for that reason, we're going to be recommending that the state increase the resources known to benefit young children facing these barriers in the areas of home visitation, developmental screening, and enrollment in quality pre-K programs. Go to the next slide. Oh, I'm sorry, you can go back. I don't know what happened to the, so I'm going to talk about each one of these three recommendations. The consortium members and on the website is a full body report that goes into a little bit more detail, has all the details that I'm going to kind of highlight here in this little bit of window of time we have in terms of what home visitation programs, developmental screening, and pre-K for 3 to 4-year-old children embodies. For home visitation programming, we are recommending that the state expand intensive home visitation programs targeted at mothers, infants, and toddlers living below the poverty line in the city of Wilmington, in order to ensure that those children are receiving the highest level of care with respect to developmental milestones for health and early learning. We're also recommending that this include a referral system that be used to ensure that mothers and children are placed in the appropriate home visitation programs. I'm going to hit the budget question for all three of these at the end. I'm going to just kind of go through that as I go through the recommendation. For developmental screening, I'm going to still stay on the slide. Sorry, Haley. For developmental screening, we know there's broad consensus that regular developmental screening of children from birth through ages 5, particularly infant and toddler years, is critical to the early detection and treatment of developmental delays and other conditions such as autism spectrum disorder. There's also a consensus that significant racial disparities exist in the appropriate developmental screening of young children. We recommend that the state provide adequate funding to the Department of Education so that it can require and enforce developmental screening requirements for state licensed childcare facilities. And then for our third focus into this broad area, we are following the national research that demonstrates early interventions can increase favorable outcomes for students facing barriers of poverty. We are focusing on pre-K for 3 and 4-year-old children. Formal center-based early childhood education program has proven to be particularly effective in improving student experiences in kindergarten and beyond. For that reason, we recommend that the state maximize its efforts to ensure that students facing the most difficult barriers of race and poverty have access to free day-long pre-K services at age 3 and 4. Looking at these three in totality, in terms of the cost estimates that we've gathered from current providers and the Department of Education and other agencies that are operating in this space, we are recommending that for the home visitation programs, approximately $600,000 per year to manage that program. And then the cost of the developmental screening would be approximately $180,000 a year for the Department of Education to expand staffing to sufficient levels to require developmental screening at licensed child care centers. And then for the pre-K to 3 and 4-year-old programs, based upon per child cost estimates published in the Delaware Early Childhood Council's PDG B5 needs assessment, we believe that the state investment of about $8 million would allow for the state to take significant steps towards ensuring high quality pre-K services to 3 and 4-year-old children facing the most significant barriers. Now, Ray, I'll kick it back to you for the wraparound services.
Okay, so wraparound services, certainly the models for delivery take many forms. There are generic terms that are used, community schools and other kind of nomenclature. Again, and it's been stated in the chat that it's important for us to look within at the best practices in Delaware and external to Delaware. So the proposal is that that these wraparound services, and we know there are some wraparound services where we're proposing that they be expanded, that they be free, that transportation be provided, that they certainly be a combination of academic supports and opportunities for students to develop personal, social, emotional competencies, that they be staffed well, which is always our goal, that they include both before, after, and summer programming, that the involvement of community partners be strong, that the staffing and the leadership be reflective of the population served, that young people, teenagers that are high school age and family members be incorporated into the after school summer programming, and that there be rigorous evaluation and involvement, again, from key stakeholders. A key element of wraparound services are school-based health centers.
Yeah, and we recognize that an inclusion of those in-house wellness centers is critical to this success. And we're recommending that the school-based health centers be established in each school where the other wraparound services are established pursuant to this recommendation. If at all possible, we recommend that in addition to making these services available to students, family, and the community members as well should also have access. in looking through to the cost estimate on this wraparound services, we are projecting or estimating in terms of the OST wraparound services of 1.5 million per school, and recommending that we start with 2 schools to begin this work with an additional one-time cost for the wellness centers of $500,000 to make the physical changes to accommodate the physical changes in the school plant to construct and form out this the health center in the building.
Okay, so this I neglected to mention earlier that for the first recommendation around data collection, research, and creating a dashboard, again, there are national measures, both quantitative and qualitative, to determine if educational equity is being achieved. And Delaware has very sharp racial disparities with respect to outcomes in our public schools. The racial disparities are not limited and directly related solely to income. Even when we control for income, there continue to be race-based disparities. So one outcome of the data collection will result in, again, making this data open and transparent and accessible so that we are using it to guide our policy, our interventions, and our supports for families and communities that attend historically segregated schools, and that there be a designation to define what is a historically segregated educational setting. Again, this is a movement across the nation that's going on. So it's projected that the collection of the data, the maintenance of the data, and making it publicly accessible will require a state expenditure of approximately $2 million in the first year and lower amounts in the subsequent years. So that's where you see this recommendation for $2 million in the FY22 budget to begin this process of data gathering and analysis related to race-related school inequality. And I believe, Jeff, do you want to add any detail around the birth to 5?
No, I'm going to I'll leave it on what I've stated, and then hope the link in the chat was shared to our PDF and our working draft that has many more of the citations in the numbers. But the numbers are there for everyone to see. I saw that in the chat to put them all in one spot, that those were the dollar amounts that we're bringing forward.
And I just want to point out that there is a detailed interim report that has been publicly posted. We're just giving a high-level synopsis. And so that concludes our overview.
Thank you. And I think Alexis with our IPA team has posted the link to the full interim report as well, which is really helpful. Thank you, Alexis. Now we have a few minutes for comments, questions, concerns from consortium members before we move on to public comment.
I put one in the chat. This is Aaron. I was just curious about I agree with the data collection tool. I have no question about that. My question was about the price tag. The data you were mentioning is already collected. It's just sorting it in a different demographic way and then making that accessible. Curious where the price tag came from. Again, not against the data collection tool, just a question about the price tag you have on it.
That's a good question. I'm sorry, Ray. I didn't go ahead.
Okay, and I'm because we've done some homework. I just want to before I turn it back to you, Jeff, I just want to say that yes, we have data, but the question is, do we use the data that we have to guide what we're doing? And there are data gaps, so we're not until we start digging in. We are not convinced that we're collecting all the data that needs to be collected in order to fully understand our students and our families' needs. Jeff.
So Aaron, we did present this at the last two work groups ago. We had a discussion, And Secretary Bunting reached out to me and said that there's a data person down at DOE that our racial justice group should connect with, Dr. Adrian Peoples. And they spent about, I don't know, they spent some time with him in the last several weeks. And he put together in having conversation with Dr. Payne and Dr. Harrison around this concept and the struggles with getting the data and making it accessible and usable to make decisions to the way that it's coming from this recommendation. Adrian provided a pretty, like a nice rough outline of a phased-in approach over it was either 3 or 4 years about what it would take to make that happen. And I think that that is part of our final it's part of our recommendation. I believe they're embedding that in the final report when we present it forward. I didn't look at it. I haven't looked at it yet, but I know Roger and Yasser had a great conversation with them. And so that's about my best answer to that question.
No, he provided very detailed information in terms of not only personnel, but do systems even talk to each other? So this is obviously an exciting proposition for me, because I'm always a student, and I believe that when we know better, we'll do better.
Ray, I know you always do your homework, so I thank you for that. And as soon as you guys said Adrian Peoples, you could have stopped right there.
Dr. Peoples, thank you. Dr. Peoples has been an excellent resource for us, and I'm sure that he will continue to be.
Yeah, I think we have a growing Dr. Peoples fan club in here, if the chat's any indication, so that's wonderful. Thank you for that excellent question, Aaron. I'd also like to thank you for giving Representative Smith a run for his holiday money on your background there. So thank you for that. Any other comments or questions on the social determinants work group recommendations at this time?
I just want to say, this is Maria Matos again, that let's make sure that when that recommendation for the assessment for the students, I could go back to that slide where we do the pre-assessment for the schools, for the kids, 0 to 4, yeah, the developmental screening. One of the issues that we have found at the LACC's Early Childhood Development Center is that they take an enormous amount of time once you make the referral. And when the referral, when the appointment actually happens, then there is a lack of translation so that the parents understand exactly what's going on. So we have to make sure that the Department of Education and the state realizes that they have to have language access.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, Maria.
Excellent.
But Ray, if we don't write it, they won't remember.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
I hear you.
I was writing it down, Maria. Got it.
Thank you.
I had a pencil in my hand.
Excellent.
There was some, there's a lot of comments in the chat. I'm not sure if Haley monitors them.
Yes, we saved
We asked Haley to do so many things at the same time.
Yes, we do.
There's a lot of questions from members of the public that I thought maybe they would be able to talk to in public comment.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks, Haley.
I think we covered most notes from consortium members. So if there are no more questions or comments from consortium members, speak up now or hold your peace until after public comment. We'd like to invite folks to volunteer to make a public comment. You can raise your hand or indicate your interest in the chat. We are going to have a very strict 3-minute limit just to keep us on track tonight. And I see one so far. And okay, just give it
real quick, I'm just going to say I'm going to put a timer on. So if you hear it dinging, that's 3 minutes. Don't let it scare you.
But do wrap it up at that point.
Maybe let it scare you. No.
Immediately. Yeah, let it scare you. So we'll be strict about that. I see 2 volunteers raising hands. Don't see any indicators in the chat. So we'll get those started. think we have about 15 minutes total. So if a couple other people decide they'd like to weigh in, feel free. We will start with Jason Heller. I saw your hand first. So your 3 minutes begins now.
Thank you, Senator Lockman, and the consortium members. I just wanted to thank you for all the time you've put in. And I just had two quick comments. First, I love the grow our own concept. And I think it would be ideal if, as part of that concept, there was some type of focus on identifying potential educator candidates young in middle and high school, and then have a pathway for them that provides experiences and essentially grooms them to encourage them to get pushed into the actual grow our own program after graduation. I think we're missing out by not identifying those folks younger. And then secondly, Representative Smith had mentioned the school board term length. I should mention I'm a board member for Brandywine School District. So I certainly understand the rationale and reasoning behind it. So just one concern I have is that there's not exactly a line of folks out there lining up, to volunteer to be a school board member. So I'm a little concerned that shorter terms could amplify that shortage of candidates, and secondarily, that there is a cost to running for this volunteer position. So there's a possibility to just consider that increasing the frequency of that cost could discourage some of the few folks that are interested in running from doing so in the first place. And then maybe a little more concerning is that I think it could discourage diversity on the boards more than is our, already that we're already seeing by adding a financial hardship to running for that volunteer position. So just a couple concerns with that I wanted to make sure we're in the mix. But thanks for everything and all the time everybody's been putting in.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks for your service to Brandywine and those really insightful comments. Okay, Deb Stevens, come on down. Your 3 minutes begins now.
Thank you, Senator Lockman. I appreciate that. And again, too, I'd like to commend all of the work of the consortium. You took on a Herculean task, and it's remarkable the amount of work you were able to accomplish. I'd like to focus my comments specifically on the whole school professional learning package and the importance of securing the commitment of both the schools and the districts that are ultimately selected to participate in this effort. I think we've seen in the past that both with Race to the Top and even a lot of the Compassionate Connections work that we've been doing in selected schools, that you often find mixed results depending upon the commitment of the district and the individual schools to the project. And it really makes it paramount to, I think, ascertain at the very beginning what the district and building commitment will be before going in and working to provide this multi-year package. The work that you're going to be doing is extremely difficult work because you're looking to change a system that may have been in place for decades. And so it is a heavy lift, and without a total commitment of the group, you really, I think are up against some significant obstacles. I would also encourage the group to consider looking to other groups outside of Delaware who've already accomplished this work. I know Harvard University, Georgetown University, Yale, they've done a lot of work because it's more than just professional learning. It's impacting a system that is steeped in poverty as well. You can't just deal with the learning issues, you have to deal with the community issues. It needs to be a whole systems project. And so I would look to see what successful models there are out there that can also help Delaware in moving this forward. And then finally, just looking at, do we have the capacity? And if not, what do we need to do to secure the needed capacity to accomplish this? I think we really need to start looking at the fine details in order to make this a success. So thank you for allowing me to make my comments.
Thank you so much, as always, Deb, for your contributions and your insight. And I don't think I see any other hands or any other volunteers. If there's anyone who can't enter in the comment or raise a hand and wanted to speak, could indicate just by calling out. But I think we're okay. Okay. Last call. All right, thank you so much. So with that, we will move on. Okay. At this point, we are going to essentially revisit each work group in order. And we'd like to invite the co-chairs of each work group to come back and introduce one by one the motions that they would like to make for to put up to a vote to our consortium members.
So the funding and governance work group, our motion is to edit and finalize House Bill 129, incorporating much of the feedback that we're getting from work group members as well as stakeholders to strengthen the bill, and to create an engagement strategy that will, again, statewide engagement to build support and understanding for House Bill 129, as well as to work with the consortium co-chairs to refile redistricting and governance legislation to formally allow the consortium to refocus on our governance efforts in 2021.
Okay, so we have a complex motion you can all see on your screen, I hope, and we'd be looking for a second.
Second.
Thank you, Eugene. I think that was Eugene Young, correct?
Yes.
Good. Two co-chairs for. So at this time, we've got a motion and a second, and you can all see the language. So we'd like to open it up to any discussion on those motions from the consortium members.
So once it's edited and finalized, will it be, will the consortium members have a chance to review it again?
Absolutely, it definitely will come back.
Okay.
So this is just the advancement for consideration, correct?
Yes, just for the advancement and for the intent.
Thank you.
Yeah, a green light to continue development under the guidance of the bill's sponsor, which is Representative Chikwocha. Any other questions or concerns before Kelly calls the roll for this motion? Okay. All right. Kelly, would you like to go ahead and do the roll call for this motion? I guess we don't need to reread it. You can all see it.
Thank you. All right. Aaron Bass.
Proof. Yes, aye.
Alfreda Butcher. She's absent. Dan Shelton.
Deirdre Eakins voting for Dan Shelton, yes.
Danielle Woods.
Yes.
Dorel Green.
Yes.
Eugene Young.
Absolutely, yes.
Henry Smith.
Yes.
James DeChaney.
Yes.
Jeff Menzer.
Yes.
Joe Jones.
Yes.
Catherine Bradley. Absent. Link Collier.
Yes.
Margie Lopez Waite. Absent. Maria Matos.
Yes.
Mike Przicki.
Yes.
Mike Smith.
Yes.
Namdi Chikotwa.
Yes.
Noel Picara.
Yes.
Ray Jones Avery.
Yes.
Stephanie Ingram,
Yes.
Ted Blunt, absent. Tika Hartstock,
Yes.
Tizzy Lockman,
Yes.
Matt Den.
Yes.
We have received the required number of votes.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Congratulations, Funding and Governance Committee. And we will move on to the next work group to make their motion. So co-chairs?
Yep, thank you. So the educators work group motions for an approval of the final recommendations as presented and allows us, the educator work group co-chairs, Mike Smith, Noel Picara, to work with the Reading Consortium co-chairs, Senator Lockman and Matt Den, to finalize the recommendations to present to the governor.
Looking for a second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, any questions on the nature of this motion or other discussion before we vote?
Well, I have the same question. When you're going to finalize it, so is it going to come back to the consortium before it goes to the governor?
We will, my understanding is we're going to take it as presented for discussion to be presented to the governor in terms of the budget items.
Well, the motion reads to finalize the recommendations.
We're finalizing the recommendations, Maria. I think one of the questions you keep going back to is the implementation plan. And if we can get on the same page on the recommendation, then we can form a group around this consortium or a smaller group within the consortium to help with the implementation plan.
Oh, yeah, I think I see. So the implementation and monitoring will continue to come back to the consortium. Is that a helpful distinction? I don't know if that's helpful or not, but because of the implementation and monitoring plan, that continues to be a responsibility of the consortium as a whole, moving forward. So
no, the only thing is, the only word that I had a problem with was finalized, because to me, finalized means that you're going to change something. So if the intent is to take this to the governor, then it needs to say that, to take the
yes, I think that point is well taken. I would, Matt and Noel, would you be willing to?
Yeah,
have
I mean, Tizzy, I don't know if this is, Senator Lockman, I don't know if this is helpful or not, but I think, with a number of these funding recommendations, they necessarily are at some level of generality. And when we start discussing them with the governor's office and hopefully with the legislature, then at some point, things have to get more specific. And I think that these motions, what they're looking for is for Senator Lockman and I to have the flexibility to get into those details as they come up. But obviously we're going to be trying to do that, faithful to and consistent with these recommendations that are getting voted on.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other questions on the wording of the motion or any other questions before we have Kelly take the roll?
All right, hearing no questions. Aaron Bass,
Yes, approved.
Dan Shelton,
Yes, approve.
Danielle Woods,
Yes.
Dorel Green,
Yes.
Eugene Young, Eugene still here?
Eugene?
Yes, I'm sorry. I was off. Yes.
Thank you. Henry Smith,
Yes.
James DeChaney,
Deshane, yes.
Deshane, sorry.
All right.
Get it right by the third time. Jeff Menzer,
Yes.
Joe Jones,
Yes.
Lynn Collier,
Yes.
Maria Matos,
Abstain.
Mike Przicki,
Yes.
Mike Smith,
Yes.
Namdi Chikwocha,
Yes.
Noel Picara,
Yes.
Ray Jones Avery,
Approved.
Stephanie Ingram,
Yes.
Tika Hartsock,
Yes.
Dizzy Lockman,
Yes.
Matthew Den.
Yes.
We have received the required number of votes.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's move on to our final work group motion, which I think is going to look a little familiar. But Ray and Jeff, if you could present that for us.
So the social,
The social determinants, come on, we're a duet now. Social determinants work group motions for the approval of the report and to allow the social determinants work group co-chairs to work with Reading Consortium co-chairs to finalize the recommendations to be presented to the governor.
Second?
I second.
Okay, great. Any discussion around this motion or any comment, question?
Senator Lockman,
Yes, sir.
I just want to raise the issue as we talk about, gathering data, reports, and reporting out data. I think it's equally important for us to stress, and I know Dr. Payne had alluded to this during their presentation with regards to, participatory action research or PAR, but also making sure that we look at action-oriented research and not just lengthy briefs, white papers, or research to help inform practice in real time and not delay. So as much as we are gathering data, I think it's equally as important to help inform practitioners who are in the field. So just stressing that, we need more action-oriented research to inform in real time and not, again, lengthy briefs, white papers, and research. So I just want to stress that as we vote on this measure.
Thank you very much. I think that's important to take into consideration as we go from recommendation to implementation. Okay, any other comments or questions? Okay, hearing none, we'll have Kelly go ahead and take the vote for this third and final motion.
All right, Aaron Bass,
Yes.
Dan Shelton, or his
Sorry,
representative.
yes.
Sorry, Deirdre.
Yes.
Danielle Woods,
Yes.
Dorel Green,
Yes.
Eugene Young,
Yes.
Henry Smith,
Yes.
James DeShane,
Thank you. Yes.
Jeff Menzer,
yes.
Joe Jones,
Yes.
Lynn Kohler,
Yes.
Maria Matos,
Yes.
Mike Przicki,
Yes.
Mike Smith,
Yes.
Namdi Chikwocha,
Yes.
Noel Picara,
Yes.
Ray Jones Avery,
Yes.
Stephanie Ingram,
Yes.
Tika Hartsock,
Yes.
Tizzy Lockman,
Yes.
Matthew Den.
Yes.
Right, we achieved the right number of votes.
Okay, I believe that does it. We have approved all of our motions to advance the recommendations from each work group. So again, I congratulate you all who have contributed to that work. To that, I think we have plenty more work to come to move these forward. But at least we have the consensus on doing that out of the way, and that is no small thing. So I think at this time, we are going to touch upon what we think our path forward looks like. Some of this will be a little bit of a rehash from what we've already been talking about to this point tonight. Some of it is a little bit of new information. Just wanted to make sure folks have, as we wrap up our work for this year and look at what is to come in 2021. So of course, for our educators work group, what we as a full consortium will be doing once we get beyond, what the motions asked us to do, is working to enact those implementation and monitoring plans. That is incumbent upon us to do that work and make sure that we're following through rather than just putting a recommendation out there and seeing where it lands. On the funding and governance work group, of course, we'll continue to use some of our capacity working on advancing and getting right that referendum reform legislation and its engagement strategy. So we'll continue to be participating in that. Consortium members who are part of that work group, our staff, and so on and so forth. For the social determinants work group, these interim proposals, the draft of what Ray and Jeff presented that we voted on tonight, will be continually built upon so that by July of next year, we'll have a full-scale plan complete with, the implementation, the monitoring strategies like we've seen, like for the educator work group. I think that's really an important way to show that we are serious about not just making recommendations, but taking action and getting it done. A couple of other items I want to make sure folks are familiar with that we are working on. One thing we wanted to announce that we've discussed in prior meetings is that we did establish an ad hoc group that is going to be completely focused on how we address the settlement moving forward, the funding settlement between ACLU and other plaintiffs with the state. And we have co-chairs for that. So we can all congratulate our co-chairs, Aaron Bass and Chuck Longfellow, who will be leading that effort in the new year. Currently, the membership includes Dean Gary Henry, Tika Hartsock, Darrell Green, and Shelley Rouser. And there will probably be a couple more seats expanded on that, and they will work with the consortium to make sure that we are doing our due diligence to offer recommendations to support the follow through of the legislature on the settlement, and also to make sure that our other recommendations moving forward are integrated with that. Of course, it was mentioned in the motion from the funding and governance work group that we will be filing new redistricting timeline legislation. It's likely that we will have further discussion on that as a consortium to ensure that we are putting forth a new timeline that's acceptable to our consortium members. We will also, of course, be looking at the consortium's composition, making sure that we are still where we need to be. Again, we wanted to make sure we had all the right stakeholders on the table. I really think we do. I think we have a wonderful group of folks who are present and contribute. We have a couple of seats that we may have some turnover in, so that's something that we will be assessing. And also, of course, assessing work groups, the extent to which their current memberships continues and the regularity of their work continues. And then, of course, we just have the work that we normally do, which is our data report on the status of public education for really focused on the city of Wilmington and doing the analysis down to that level so we can really see where we are. Of course, we have some COVID interruptions in terms of that data, but we'll still be following through. And our annual report to the legislature on the status of our work and all of the hard work that we've been doing in the last months will be reflected there, and I hope appreciated. One note that I did want to make on consortium composition, we did have one change that's not official yet, but I did want to mention because he was here earlier in our meeting, that Senator Ernie Lopez will be representing Senate Republicans as a member of our body moving forward. So just wanted to put it out there that he was here earlier and to thank him for his interest and participation. So those, we have a lot to do. in order to keep this work going. And the hope is that all of this work has given us an opportunity to build momentum, get some things done, and continue to what we would consider to be our full work plans that we've discussed as we've gone. Would anyone else like to make a comment, Matt or others? Matt?
Nope, well said.
Thank you. I think that's it.
Senator Lockman,
yes.
On behalf of all of us, thank you for your leadership, and former Lieutenant Governor Matt Den. You guys are incredible. We know that we're on first or second base. And I also want to encourage everyone to follow the safety measures as we enter into the next phase of our holiday season. I'm a self-appointed public health ambassador. I'm trying to get out of the house. So please, everybody, spread light, not COVID. Really be very careful. We can do this. We've got to slow this thing down and eliminate it. So, happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays. I think I've heard people say we want everyone to stay positive, but not COVID positive. So just be safe. Stay hopeful, and thank you for all of the work that you've done, and we look forward to continuing it in 2021. Have a good night, everybody.
Feliz Navidad.
Feliz Navidad.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. Thank you, and happy Hanukkah too.
Yes, happy Hanukkah. It's tonight. It started.